Thank you. Sir.
Well,
Any area all day.
Okay. Have you been taking care
I
of?
tell you, it's
No, I
better
haven't.
than warm water.
huh?
It's better than warm water.
I need Jack Dan.
You got it. That's cool. Right?
Maybe that's something to do with that reservation we saw.
Oh yeah, it shrunk, I guess. If you have to move the cake, feel free.
Nice time.
Yeah.
You're making two Siberia, and between the Commodores and then back, you know, a lot of cars, you're money after
Got some of these subjects.
time gets around, there won't be any red pills left.
You poured it off the side that day, didn't you? The other
Yes, I did, and I spilled it too.
Is there any red pills left?
And what I'm doing now is
We've got a problem. We need a flag. Can you do one more flag, like for the evasion people? And she said, well, I think so. So to make a long story short, I called back to General Ralph Patton, and I said, Ralph, it's doable. I've got Betsy Ross Smith on the hook. Now, the only problem I have is I don't know the exact time of delivery. But I think if we play our cards right, we can have it for our next reunion. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I would really like you to meet my daughter-in-law and the great Betsy Ross Smith. And please stand up. It may interest you to know that she has done a couple other banners. And she probably made a mistake in doing the first one, but she did come through, and God bless you. And we really appreciate it. So I have one more thing that's not on your agenda, and I take great pride in doing this. In 1964, Ralph Patton and a couple of his friends got the bright idea of having an escape and evasion meeting. And we were meeting in Niagara Falls, New York in 1964. Now, AFEES started with a group of evaders that came off from the beach at Tua. It was the Resolute Shelburne. And the first AFEES meeting was entirely people that had come off from the Brest Peninsula. by the good works of the British Navy. Well, today, I don't know how many of that original 25 or 30 live. But I do know that there are 4. 3 of them are here tonight. And one is a great young man who couldn't make it. His name is Tony Onisi. He lives just east of San Francisco. And a young man that flew with me for some time, Mr. Bill Boer, was one of the original ones, and his wife was with him. Stand up, please. And then there was Ralph Patton and Dick Smith. And so I'm pleased to tell you that since that meeting in 1964, Ralph has been basically the guiding light for the Air Force's Escape and Evasion Society, and I have had the good fortune of being on the board since its inception. And I think that's important for a lot of you to know. So now we'll go back to the banquet agenda. I want to welcome you all. It's a great pleasure for me to see the wonderful turnout that we have. All you wonderful people that did such a great job in the mid-40s, that you would muster your physiques and your pocketbooks and come back to visit us every year. You're to be commended, and I welcome you all with your wives, your friends, and your family. I think it's absolutely tremendous that you all do this. And so God bless you all.
I belong to this organization, and my daughter found the rest of it on the internet.
How about that? Well, I commend you and your daughter.
I'm a strange duck. I'm a native Albuquerquean. I'm a little late in welcoming you to Albuquerque, but I want you to know that for the past 2 nights, I've been on my knees praying and thanking the Lord for the good weather that you've had.
They look like him, don't they?
Oh, they absolutely
Because I happened to get shot down. So he's a commanding officer, wing commander, I guess is the proper phraseology. Colonel Tom Trask and his wife Karen. Sir, I give back to you the microphone. You're going to take your glasses with you. You may need them. Look, you're getting into my stuff. I'm not making a speech.
Take it.
You're taking my notes. You probably have heard a few laughs up here, and you're probably wondering why. Well, it's my nutty 3 kids. They can tell the damnedest stories and laugh at the craziest things you ever saw. But anyway, I'd like to introduce you first to Betsy Ross Smith. This is Ann Smith, Ricky Smith's wife. And next is my old friend from the days when I had to work, Bill McCarthy. He and his wife Marty live now up in Santa Fe. If you want some well done free ceramics, look them up in the phone book. And between Bill and Marty is my grandson, Jonathan Smith. He is the son of our oldest boy. And then there is Kevin, our oldest boy. He's the one that talked, who was the sergeant down at the guy who sent the tinker? Well, Colonel Sims. Yeah, oh yeah, Colonel Sims. Kevin and Richie are the ones that talked him into getting us on to Tinker Air Force Base and going through a AWACS. And what a trip that was. We'd gone all through it and saw all the stations and everything, and I'm down on the tarmac, and I hear one of the kids say, "Hey, Pa." I look up here, they are. They're 60 feet up in the air looking off from the top of the dome. It's not good. And then there's my daughter, Marcia. She takes a lot of static from her brothers.
Well, I would tell you all that this is, as you know, this is one of the true highlights that I get to do every year. And it is something that is very dear to me, and as Linda and I come here, now this is my 5th time. Now Yvonne, I think we've got, and Yvonne's already cemented next year as well. And I would tell you, we normally, wherever I come, whichever thing I'm coming to, Yvonne doesn't even talk about the one that I'm at. She always talks about the next one that I'm supposed to come to. So Yvonne has done that again, and so I will just tell you that it's really a delight for Linda and I to be here with you. The chairman, Chairman Patton, actually on a couple of those years that were off, we actually got a chance to celebrate your birthday with you in Washington, and that was very special to Linda and I would just tell you how much that meant, that we got to be with you and your family and the kids, and that has been very, very special to us. The President. Boy, do I have some dirt on the President now. I had no idea. This has been great. So I would just tell you that what a delight it is, because one of the things that I get to do is, you all probably know, or you may not know, is how often I tell the story about you. When I go around the world and I talk to our different young troops, and I go in there, I will always tell them about AFEES and about the greatest generation, about these great Americans and these great people from Europe that helped them.
And I tell them what it's like about putting your lives on the line for others. And it's just a delight. And then I tell them about that's always embodied when you talk about saving other people's tomorrows and protecting other people's tomorrows, putting your life on the lines for others. That it is embodied in the children and grandchildren that are always here at AFEES as well. And every time I hear the stories from the children, every time I get down and we start even talk about grandchildren, I think about the hikes of the Pyrenees, and with the Grauholzes, they have all the stories about the good-looking guys that led them across. They didn't talk much about what they saw, but they would always talk about the good-looking guys that went with you across the Pyrenees. And I would just tell you that I tell them about this, and it is always unbelievable. And you should see how these folks look as they think about what you did. But it's also embodied as you look around. You see Colonel Trask, Tom, great to have you here. And Karen, I told Karen before when I got to meet her about how much I appreciated her sacrifice. Because all of you know that it's a lot easier to put yourself on the line than it is to allow a loved one to put themselves at risk for others. So Karen, thank you. And I would tell you that's pretty much across the board to all the loved ones that allow people to serve around the world in harm's way so that other people may be free. It is not small. It is huge. And I thank you. Now we've got Captain John Kerry out there. John is out there, and I would tell you, here's one of those great Americans out there flying airplanes. He's doing it for Tom over here, but I would just tell you that there is nothing that's neater than what we get to do. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I would tell you, folks like Tom, and I just came to hear from Travis, where I got to meet. Travis is our largest wing. It has a number of C5s and KC-10s, but it's got a lot of people that go out there in harm's way, that drive convoys and go out there and do things. And you get down and you sit down and you talk to these young folks, these young airmen, and they tell you about what they're doing. Now, it does make me a little angry that they have better war stories than I do. You know, they come on over here, son, let me tell you about going into Anaconda. Let me tell you about going into Balad, and half the runway shut down and I'm single engine, and all those kinds of things. And they are doing this, and you ought to be so very, very proud of them. Master Sergeant Doug Fuhrer. Where's Doug? Doug's over there. Another great. Now, I brought two folks with me that they'll be embarrassed that I bring this up, but I will. But I have a brand new command chief, and he is the top enlisted in all the Air Mobility Command. And the Air Mobility Command has about 144,000 people. And when you think about how many NCOs that is, that's up in the neighborhood of 120,000, 115 to 120,000 NCOs. And he is the #1 NCO of all of those folks, and he represents them so well. Now, Command Chief Barron came to me from 2nd Air Force, which was down at Keesler Air Force Base down in the great state of Mississippi. And Chief Barron is one of the true heroes of Katrina. When Katrina came through there, he was one of the folks that brought the base back, but was out there helping the community rebuild and make all these things happen. And this is one of those true heroes. Chief Barron. Other one that I need to tell you is that Chief Joe Barron said, hey, compared to being around Colonel Cheryl Ostroff, Katrina was nothing. Colonel Cheryl Ostroff, this is the first time she's gotten to come to AFEES, and I told her, I said, wait till you see this. You will just be, this is unbelievable. When you meet these great Americans and their families, and these great folks from Europe that helped them, and you will be amazed. And Cheryl, I call her my award-winning aide. She wins awards all the time. It's usually we give an award to whichever 4-star aide had the biggest screw up, and Cheryl wins it. Cheryl was my adjutant as a 2nd lieutenant. Came right out of school, right out of Florida, University of Florida. And one of those gators, and her husband was a navigator that worked for me. And it basically came and well, they have lower standards there in Florida. But Mac, I'm just saying facts. I'm not making any kind of judgment here. But Cheryl came in and she was a senior at Florida, and I made the mistake of saying to her that, she came and I said, well, what do you want to do? First time, I'm brand new squadron commander. When you're squadron commander, you're not sure what you really can do, but you think you can bluff your way through it. And so she comes, and we go to this big party. It's out in the woods, and there's a big bonfire, and I'm thinking, this is a pretty cool squadron. I'd been an ops officer in another squadron here. I'm going, hey, this is pretty daggum cool. South Carolina, this is good stuff. And they were roasting oysters in big burlap bags, and so I meet Cheryl and her husband, Mark, and I said, well, what are you doing? And they said, well, we're married, and I'm a navigator, and she's down at Florida. And I said, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? And she goes, well, I want to come to Charleston, and I want to work for you in the squadron. And I'm looking at her going, of course, this is the first person that's ever said anything like that to me. And of course, I'm a brand new squadron commander, big stuff, puff my chest out. And I say, well, if you're number one in your class, we'll just see what we can do. Now that was my mistake, because of course, Cheryl calls back about 3 months later. She goes, okay, big guy, I'm number one in my class. Let's see what you can do. Now, I have only said that to 2 women. There was another one when I was at Charleston, and she went off to nav school, and she was the one that I got to know because Cheryl built a mafia at Charleston, and these women ended up running Charleston Air Force Base. And this one went off to nav school, and I still remember that this other one was going off to nav school, and so she gets there, and she called, I said, well, what do you want to do after nav school? She goes, well, I'd like to come to Charleston. And I said, stupidly, if you're number one, just let me know, I'll see what I can do. And she calls back and says, I'm number one. And here I am, and I'm stuck. Now, I have told at least 100 guys that. They've never, ever called back. Never, ever called back. 2 women, and they both, so don't say it to women. I'm just telling you, Tom, I'm telling you. It's just the way it is. But seriously, I've been with, Cheryl and Mark have been part of our family for a lot of years. And so when we found out that we were going to get this assignment, she had come out of the State Department and had a huge job on the Joint Staff, and I still remember calling her up saying, okay, because when I called Linda, I said, well, what you do? Now, one thing you get to do is you get to choose your aide. And Linda goes, we have got to have Cheryl, if you can convince her. And I go, I don't know if I can. But then we started talking about you'd have more chance to see the Final Four, you'd have a lot of other things, if Florida ever got there. But these 2 great Americans represent the very best that we have. I would tell you that, Tom, I know I know Captain Carey and Master Sergeant Fuhrer are the same way. They're representative of some great folks out there that understand the legacy that you have left them. This great honor of serving others. That is, when the whole world looks, they watch and they hope and they pray and they applaud. And I tell folks, and I told them at Travis, I said, you had a greatest generation. They're very humble. You almost can't get them to talk about what they did, but you will be amazed at how you will feel. Because when we get to go to Bethesda, or we get to go to Walter Reed, or we go down to the medical center down in San Antonio, the Brooke Army Medical Center, and you get to see these young folks that have lost a leg or an arm or their sight or their hearing, and you look at them and they don't tell you about the IED that hit them or the rocket. They will tell you about a family they touched, a young Afghan family, a young Iraqi family, some child, but they'll always tell you about that, and it is unbelievable. And then they'll say, we're ready to go back. And I still remember one young Marine, and he just looked great. He'd come back from working out, first time he'd run on his new prosthetic leg. And we talked and said, well, what do how you doing? And he goes, oh, I'm doing fine. He says, I'm ready to go back. And he says, when folks ask me about this, I just tell them that, I know for the next, 80 years, I'm going to live in freedom in this country. And all my loved ones will live free too. So this is not a big thing for me. I was glad to do this. And that's how they are. And that's how you were. That's how you were. And that's why it's such a great honor for me to come and be with you. Because I would tell you that you would be so proud of our young folks that are out there, that rode to the sound of the gun. Most of them signed up after 9/11. Most of them knew what they were signing up for. And it is a long war. We've already been at war for the U.S. portion of this, longer than we were in World War II. Already longer. But there is some great evil out there that we've got to confront. Not unlike the evil that you all had to face. It truly is a battle of good over evil, of light over darkness, of hope over despair, of freedom over tyranny. That's what we're fighting for. And it's just not the folks in the United States. It's the folks all around the world that are watching and hoping. And that's what I tell them. And then I tell them the tomorrow story. I tell them about you. And tell them about the love affair that is between downed airmen and the helpers in Europe that helped them. And both of you all put your lives on the line for the other. And it comes so home to all of those young Americans. So Yvonne, I would tell you that I always talk about Lady Daly. I would tell you, General Lady Daly almost sounds better. And I think General of the Air Force. Please, let's slow that down.
Where slaves get promoted?
That's right. But I would just say from the very first time, when you think about the passion of bringing this all together and doing this with the passion that you do, and I always kid you, but I tell you what, I love you too. I sit back and I think about how much you care about all this. But I would tell you, you can see that in Larry Garholz. You can see that in Dick Smith. You can see that in Ralph Patton. You can see that across the board, how much you love this. And it is such a great part to do. When I was out at the memorial this morning, it hits me the same way. And it was the same thing that hit Linda, lighting those candles. It is something that is always heart-wrenching. And I would tell you that as I visited Travis, as I mentioned, but last week I flew the last C-141 flight. It actually went from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and we flew it over to the museum that's right next door. But it was, it was a little nice. It was kind of like you landing on the roads. All these X'd out landings, and I'm landing going, I think I'm along just in case this goes south, and they'll blame me. I think that's why I'm along. But I would tell you, we took that across, and the POWs and MIAs, because that was 60177, which you remember, that was the airplane that brought the first bunch of POW MIAs out. And of course, it was a very emotional moment, because that was something that all of us remember in '73. And here was the last flight of the last 141, and there were all these POWs that were there, and we had a big dinner in the museum that night. But again, people that put themselves on the line. And the Sante Raiders. And the Sante Raiders were the ones that, if you all remember, went in and, again, put their lives on the line. And as these POWs said, they said, you all thought that you had failed because you didn't get us out. And yet we would tell you that the fact that you came was all that made the difference. And that's true. And you all know that. So those are the things that hit me. And I would just tell you that, as I thought about some of the things that went on, yesterday, or this morning, one of the prayers, and I think about it, and I'll probably use this. I've used it tomorrow a lot. I've used some of the other, I've stolen from your memorial ceremony. But when we say, for all who turned mankind toward the light of hope and spoke the promise of a brightening future, be with us in a deepened gratitude. When I think of the folks today, those soldier, sailor, airmen, and Marines, think about these special ops folks that are out there on the line, putting themselves on the line for others. You know that they will forever be changed, because they know that they went to the rescue of others, they put their lives on the line for others, they were tested under fire, and they were found worthy. And that's what you all do. That's what you all do. With these, O God, may we find new fortitude and reinforcement for the times in which we live, this great evil that we're at, until by patience and persistence and enduring courage, we become sufficient for the task that we must undertake. Let us go forth with new strength for the days ahead. This is a long war. This is a tough enemy. Devoted to the love which heals all wounds and the courage that casts out fear. Full of hope that never dies. Hand in hand, let us go forward together, mindful of our precious freedom and of our great responsibilities. Well, I will tell you, we have built a new greatest generation. And when you all see those folks out there, you will just be amazed at what they're like. And the young airman that's 23 years old is teaching the 19-year-old airman what this is all about. And it's all the way across the board. And they're saying, these are our values. This is what we stand for. This is who we are. And boy, you all be proud. And so when I come here, this renews me. And I have one vignette that I tell folks. And I would tell you that this could have been said of the greatest generation. And it was done by a novelist named Frank Schaeffer. And Frank Schaeffer, his son was from one of those Northeast, it was a private school in the Northeast, one of those highfalutin, one of those, great universities that or one of those private schools that normally they will follow in one of the great universities. But his son decided not to do that. He decided to join the Marines. And some of the folks around him, some of the more wealthy folks, just could not understand why his son joined the Marines. And this is what he wrote. Before my son became a Marine, I never thought much about who was defending me. Now when I read on the war on terrorism or the coming conflict in Iraq, it cuts to my heart. When I see a picture of a member of our military who has been killed, I read his or her name very carefully. Sometimes I cry. In 1999, when the barrel-chested Marine recruiter showed up in dress blues and bedazzled my son John, I did not stand in the way. John was headstrong, and he seemed to understand these stern, clean men with straight backs and flawless uniforms. I did not. At the private high school John attended, no other students were going into the military. One perplexed mother, while standing next to me at the brunch following graduation, remarked, "What a waste. He was such a good student." One parent, a professor at a nearby and rather famous university, spoke up at a school meeting and suggested that the school should carefully evaluate what went wrong. However, my son has connected me to my country in a way that I was too selfish and insular to experience. Why were I and the other parents of my son's private school so surprised by his choice? During World War II, the sons and daughters of the most powerful and educated families did their bit. Have we wealthy and educated Americans all become pacifists? Is the world a safer place? Or have we just gotten used to having somebody else defend us? I feel shame because it took my son's joining the Marine Corps to make me take notice of who is defending me. I feel hope because perhaps my son is part of a future greatest generation. As the storm clouds of war, at least I know that I can look the men and women in uniform in the eye. My son is one of them. He is the best I have to offer. He is my heart. And I would tell you that those young folks have followed in your tradition. They are the heart of their loved one, and collectively they are the heart of this nation. And all freedom-loving people look to see how they do this and how they stand. And you can be very proud of how they're doing this. Again, I cannot tell you how much we enjoy being with you all. You don't know how much you inspire. Me, as Linda, I would tell you that there's not one of us that is touched by what you did and what you do. And I tell folks that one of the neatest things, it is a family. We're entrusted by the American people with their most precious and fundamental right, their freedom. But one of the things that is a true honor as part of that is the fact that we get to work along some of the greatest sons and daughters our country has to offer, bonded by their desire to serve and by their common patriotism. And I'm overwhelmed every time that I'm with you all. You all, great Americans, and the folks from Europe that helped them escape and evade back so they could fight again. It is awesome. Great to be with you all.
I almost declined the kind offer to introduce my friend, but Dr. Walter Brown has been a friend of AFEES, well, since the inception of the 8th Air Force Museum down in Savannah. And I met him down there when the museum was a dream. And it was a dream of a guy by the name of Major General Lou Blau. And Lou and Brown and Lieutenant General Schuler built the museum down in Savannah, Georgia, that commemorates the activities of the 8th Air Force. And I think that Dr. Brown has just been appointed the CEO of the museum. And I think that our heritage is in good hands. I've supported the museum when others failed to, and so therefore I've been highly regarded by the people at the museum, including Dr. Brown. We want to take advantage of that now and ask for some favors. We want to try to get this museum to more adequately display the bravery of our helpers, the role that they played in spite of the adversity they faced. Now, Dr. Brown is an emergency room doctor. He's been there for 39 years, so he can take care of you if you faint, and I'm about to. Come up here, Walter.
Be here among friends. This is a group that I am very comfortable with, and it's because you make me feel comfortable when I come. You're witnessing some history, I'm sure. It's probably not in Guinness, but this has got to be the first time that an ER doc followed a 4-star general on the podium. And it is a privilege. I had a 45-minute talk to give, and CEO Daly told me I had 10 minutes, so I've been editing it at the table. Editing is one of my things I tend to do. Ralph Wright, the AFEES group, was one of the very first groups to kick in and help us with the museum. And the exhibit never, in my mind, has turned out like it should be. We've had meetings this week with the powers that be in the organization. And over the years, I'd go down and see the exhibit, and I'd say, well, you know, if I was in charge of this, I would do such and such and that kind of thing. Last week, I went down and looked at it again before I came out. And I said, you know, if I was in charge of this, and I am, we're going to have this exhibit. And I have a few comments about what some plans are in just a few minutes about that. So we're going to have fun with it, but it is going to tell a story like one that is not told in any other museum. And this is your museum, the home of the permanent home of the 8th. And we're moving into some of the other air forces. The 15th, we're giving some room for all of the forces that serve because they all interact, and we're looking forward to the future of the museum. I wanted to apologize. I have some comments that I wanted to get across tonight, and I will take a few minutes to do those. And they have to do with Lou Lyle that Ralph mentioned, the founder of the museum. But he is, I talked to him today, I'll see him on Tuesday. He's coming to a museum board meeting. He's 90 and full speed ahead, sharp as ever. I wanted to apologize to this organization. Last time I spoke, I think, Duncan, when we were in Wichita Falls. And I made a few unwarranted remarks about Kentucky. My practice was in Nashville, and they always gave us hell about the orange that Tennessee wore. Well, I'm a dog, so I wear red and black. Very sorry. But we get on to Kentucky a good bit. And I said something unwarranted. I said, you may recall, and I mentioned that, did you know the toothbrush was invented in Kentucky? If it had been invented anywhere else, it'd be called a teeth brush. And there was no place here for that kind of comment. And the comment about Kentucky, you know, you guys, when you go in for your yearly physical, and I'm the guy with the glove, you remember? They don't call it KY jelly for nothing. You know? I think it was invented in Kentucky. It's on your pharmacy's shelf there. But I noticed in the news the other day, Kentucky makes news occasionally, and I noticed the other day that the legislature in Kentucky has raised and give them credit, admirable thing, they've raised the drinking age in Kentucky to 29, from 21 to 29. And what they're trying to do is keep the alcohol out of the schools. So, give them credit. Anybody here from Kentucky? I'll speak good tonight. Let me mention a few things that many of you know, but many do not. I'm well aware of. And this is about Lou Lyle, General Lou Lyle. I had a little write-up, and I do better sometimes to keep it in order, and I'll read a little bit of it and try and make a few comments along the way. After flight training, Lou was an asthmatic, heavy asthmatic all the time when he was a kid. They didn't have much treatment for it. He faked his way through the physicals. He had a doctor tell him how to fake his breathing exams, and he got into flight training. The 10-man crew of the B-17 Old Soldier flew the North Atlantic route to their 303rd Bomb Group base at Molesworth, England. They were among the first 4 bomb groups to arrive in England and began flying missions to bomb the Nazi submarine pens at Flak City, St. Nazaire, on the Atlantic coast of France. Without fighter escort on these missions of early 1943, the 8th Air Force had to learn by daily experience just how to be effective in fighting the war and how to return home intact. This was a bomber war, and no country had ever been in a bomber war before. And there weren't any books on it, no manuals on it. Very little training at that point. These raids often saw 12 to 15% of the heavy bombers being lost to enemy flak guns and Luftwaffe fighters, essentially precluding any chance of completing the required 25 missions of a combat crew's tour of duty. One of Lou's crew's early missions was one of secrecy. They were especially chosen, the crew was, to proceed to an isolated air base on the southern coast of England, and there they were told that they were to fly the 8th Commander, General Ira Aker, Colonel Leon Johnson, and others to North Africa to attend the preliminaries of what would be known as the Casablanca Conference, the conference eventually where we went into round-the-clock bombing of Germany. They were to take the same route that the then 8th Commander, General Asa Duncan, had taken when he disappeared on a similar flight just 2 weeks earlier. He was never found. Lou and his important entourage made the trip without incident. Lou served as group commander, 303rd Bomb Group, and then the 379th Bomb Group at Kim Bolton, and by the end of the war in May of 1945, both groups were among the top units in bombing accuracy and tonnage dropped. He, on all of his missions, never lost an airplane, never lost a crewman, and never had any of his crewmen wounded in battle. He flew 76 plus missions, often a lot of them uncredited. After that, he'd go bump off on the ramp when they were revving up, you were revving up. He would bump off the pilot, get in the left seat, fly the mission, and bring them home and give that mission credit to that pilot. I've had a lot of the 303rd guys come tell me that they were involved with that, unsuspecting. Lou prepared his crews and prepared himself to face the unpredictable circumstances of weather, enemy opposition, and the unknowns of the air war over Europe. He knew that preparation and practice were the essentials to surviving the war. On VE Day 61 years ago, Lou went outside of the headquarters buildings at Kim Bolton. The war had ended. The base was eerily quiet, free of noise of aircraft engines and daily life on the base. His thoughts were not of home, not of peace, and not even of the trials he had experienced leading massive bomber streams to Berlin. Lou Lau thought, the war is over, I won't be able to fly any more bombing missions. I won't be able to do the one thing I'm really good at. Well, after the war, Lou got good at some other things. He went in SAC. He became in charge of the United States missile program, and I think that was the 13th missile, I believe, wing, would it have been a wing or something, 13th missile group. He became in charge of plans and operations under General J.P. McConnell and Tommy Power, and developed our defense against Russia, nuclear defense, retaliation defense against Russia during the Cold War, and many of us remember those days. He was involved with Cuban Missile Crisis. Khrushchev pulled out of Cuba in large part because he had 1,000 nuclear warheads aimed with a reflex system to get his B-47s back, aimed at Moscow. And these are things that are not in all the history books, but he was part of that. And after the war, he probably had one of his worst experiences, I guess, in terms of his career, in that he took over Northeast Airlines, and this was Howard Hughes' airline. There's some great Howard Hughes stories that Lou has that I won't get into right now. During those years, the letters began to accumulate in stacks in the office at his home in Hot Springs. Most of the correspondence was from families who wanted to find out any information they could about what happened to their loved one lost during the war against Germany. For many families of the more than 28,000 airmen of the 8th Air Force killed in action, Lou was their last hope of comfort, and he had to do something about it. It seemed to be very important that the sacrifices made by those who served not be forgotten. He set out to find a permanent home and build a permanent home for the mighty 8, a place to honor the airmen, preserve their legacy. He wanted to build a museum to present the history to future researchers, historians, and to 8th Air Force family members. The museum settled in Savannah. He drove all over the country looking at museums, talking to groups, particularly 8th Bomb Group fighter groups. Historical Society, Bob Vickers was early in on that. Several others that are in the room had him, the New Mexico Historical Society chapter had him here in Albuquerque. The beautiful facility is now celebrating its 10th anniversary today. This is the 10th anniversary of being in existence. It has become a destination for a wide variety of people and stands out among aviation-oriented museums as a people museum, not a war museum and not an airplane museum. The story of the airmen of the 8th Air Force lies within. General Charlie Metcalf, and I forget his military title, but he is historian in charge of, I guess, the airplanes, particularly Warbirds airplanes across the country, has been to the museum. We tried to get his help to get a B-17 in. We're following some other channels as well. But he has said that this is one of the top museums he's ever seen that is about people. And the people are you. I'm real excited about being CEO there. I'm not a museum guy. I've been involved on the board, as Ralph alluded, for 14 years. I was the backup guy to Buck Schuler, so every other day Buck would call me and debrief me or fill me in on problems and ways that we were handling them. We'd talk back and forth. We did that for many years, so that if he bumped off, medical language, then he would have somebody to step in, and that's the Schuler command method. I'm having a great time now with me calling Buck every couple of days and filling him in on what he needs to do. If something happens to me, he'll move Savannah and take over the museum. And he knows how to do it very well. Museum Archives, we are becoming the research center for aviation medicine, World War II medicine. We just got the Roger A. Freeman collection. You know that Roger wrote the book on 8th Air Force. He wrote 63 books. He was a Brit that grew up on next to a fighter group airfield, American airfield. And all of his archives after he died in October, he willed over to us, and we've just gotten them in. The Harry Gobrecht 303rd archives are in a detailed description of everything that a bomb group did during World War II. It is the definitive history of a bomb. He spent 20 years, literally 6 to 8 hours a day. He's out in California. And on our board, I speak to Harry frequently. We have the Jacob Fredericks collection. Jake, we call him, was in charge of targeting, 3rd Air Division. Dan McGovern collection, many of you know Dan. He was the cameraman for a lot of combat footage and in Hollywood after that for a career. Richard Sims collection. Various bomb group, fighter groups collections. This past week, Merle Olmsted, who has been the historian for the 357th Fighter Group, has told us we could come to California and pick up everything he's got about the 357th. And what we do is archive these, we catalog them and make them available for researchers and historians to come in and learn any specific areas, learn about any specific areas they're interested in. We have over 21,000 period photographs archived in. Original, I call them period, they're World War II era photographs. 8,000 personal objects, the collections. Big art gallery with original oil paintings of every known American air base in England during the war. 800 oral histories. Many of you here have got your oral history catalog. We're now moving them into a format that will allow researchers to pick out what every 8th Air Force airman did on October the 14th, 1943, if he was a tail gunner or if he was a radio operator. And that was 2nd Schweinfurt. They can do any other mission, and it's amazing what's going to be available to get the word out to the younger generations of what you did during the war. what happened during the war, why it happened, and how the result came about. We got about 8,000 books in. We have a database with 160,000 histories. I was going to say medical histories. I'm still there. War histories of 8th Air Force Airmen. A lot of other volumes that associated with that. We have the presentations. The primary presentation at the museum in terms of exhibitry that's interactive is a museum, is a mission experience where you can go in, and those of you who've done it, many of what I call the original guys can't make it all the way through, and every day we'll have them come out and we'll sit and talk and have some nice conversation. But you fly a mission into Germany, and it's about a 25-minute experience. Our volunteer crews, many of them original guys, will take the younger generations through, and they are overwhelmed and awed to get to be able to speak to a World War II airman and go through that mission experience. There's a lot of other things, and I am running out of time, and I'm aware of that. Let's talk about the AFEES exhibit. If you weren't at the general meeting this morning, we brought up the subject of the PX, and we're going to work with our PX at the museum to take over so we can continue availability of AFEES items, including books written by the helpers and their families, and by 8th Air Force Airmen and 15th Air Force and other Air Forces as well. We'll have those in our PX. We're going to have a banner in the rotunda. Those of you who've seen the banners hanging of all the bomb groups, they bought those, sponsored them all. We will sponsor, the museum will sponsor the AFEES banner, and we're going to get with the head committee, the board of directors, to decide exactly how to present that, what goes on it, and how it'll appear to the public. Pardon me, war between the states. He was shot down. He flew early on, and on that mission, he lined up his B-17's line abreast as opposed to the later developed combat box. And he got shot down over the North Sea. Thomas Jackson Christian crashed his P-51 chasing an ME-109. He was Stonewall Jackson's great-grandson. He served in the 8th Air Force. There are a lot of other connections, and some of you may have connections, and I'm sure ancestors. I want everybody to come to the museum, and we're starting on the exhibit now. I have a team coming in from Kansas City in 2 weeks, the first week of June, to evaluate the Escape and Evasion exhibit. It will be revised in an appropriate manner. We're going to have input from this organization, and we're going to have fun doing it, and you will be proud of it when you see it. Please come to the museum, bring your friends. People will come in and plan to stay an hour or two, and they'll spend the night next door and come back the next day. And it's a museum that all of you can be proud of. I'm very proud of it, just to be part of it. The story of the 8th is there. It'll be there for future generations, 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. I guess by that time pretty much of us will be not at the museum, but everything we do today will be there. And we're looking forward to the progress we're going to make. And thank you for the privilege of, Yvonne, me taking a little bit too much time, but thank you very much.
How are you, young lady? Thank you very much. We're absolutely delighted you're here. And we're absolutely delighted you were there when we needed you. New Orleans last year and received a medallion. We have a picture history book that Mr. Paul Reese put together for us. It's well done. I think it's got pictures. I think it has pictures in it of everybody that was there. And so we would like to give this book to those of you helpers who were in New Orleans last year. So come on, come on. Why don't you just step over here and we're going to take some more pictures. Feel great, smile.
Marguerite.
You certainly do. With great pleasure, I present the history of New Orleans, AFEES 205. Thank you very much. And I'm not sure I can do that. Oh, it might be all right. My wife isn't here. And his wife, George, if you please.
Hello.
Here we go. We now are going to make 3 or 4 of you very rich.
This gift for you. Gift. You are for the American hero. Hero. Landing, liberate 44 years with one engine. One engine.
He had a land. He only had one engine left. He was also pushing a little bit with one engine.
Siete motoro.
Yes.
Čuj, sa mojim aparatom, sa mojim. Kako ću ja imati sliku?
Guy taking a picture, the guy taking a picture.
Ja.
How was it?
Sam.
Dobre?
Slikaj sa mojim, da ja imam sliku. A ti drži knjigu.
A gdje imam?
Ne. Ovo, bravo.
Well, it has just come to my attention that
Natali Velika.
the great history of AFEES, some years ago, was made of interest and well known to Frank Lasinski, who is, at least for our age, one of the great electronic experts of our era. And it was kind of at his direction and his ability that Clayton and Scotty got their information together, and through Frank's help and his people that he knows and knows of, he was able to have all of that information put into such miniature form. So I think we need to tell and give Frank a big hand for all he had to do.
What I want to explain is, I was contacted by the Pentagon because they were searching for one of our crew members and who's still missing in action over 60 years ago. And I had contacts then with the Department of Missing and in Action people that are working in the Pentagon. And I started working with them, and I asked them if they, I knew Scotty had the large books that did not fit into any type of scanner that was very readily available. And I found out that the Pentagon had equipment to do that type of scanning. And I talked to them asking if they might consider doing it. And they did. And Scotty talked to them and brought the books to them and had the books scanned, and that's the result of what you have right there. Sergeant Joe Barron to draw the first ticket. And I cleared it with General McNabb. So, will he please come up and go?
Okay. Thank
Okay. We have